Welcome to another Good Dads podcast. I am Jay Fotsch alongside Jason Hynson from Victory Mission. Thank you so much. You do Intentional Dad, and we'll get a little brief synopsis about that before we talk to Dyllan Dale, who is our guest today. And we're going to be talking about handling peer pressure and self-esteem. Jason, how did this kind of come about? I just want to kind of set everybody like where we're at with the Intentional Dad.
Yeah, so I think the whole idea is like, if you want to be intentional, then you're an intentional dad. Like, you're trying to figure out ways to do that. And I got to know Dyllan. He's a friend of mine, works with me at Victory Mission, and has been through Good Dads. He went through the Good Dads programming and all that. And I just thought, man, he's had some life experiences I haven't. And I thought, man, this would be a great kind of conversation to see how he's been an intentional dad with people, with his kids and stuff too. So it's exciting.
when you say intentional, it's more about your actions. I think it's just really about, okay, this is some hard stuff. I've got to do this. Yeah. Like, I can think it, I can talk about it on these podcasts, but the intentional part is the actual actions, like doing part of your plan, right?
Yeah. Let me tell you a story from today. It was interesting. My wife we have a kid who wants to do an activity. It's a new activity. He's like, he wants to go be a football star. And it's like, dude, you're 15. So we just had this whole conversation. It didn't fit the family goals. And so I had to be an intentional dad and have the tough conversation, because my wife's like, I'm getting badgered here. He just, And so I finally was like, listen, look, we love you, right? And you can be either bitter, or you can be like, hey, my parents, like, they looked at this and it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Right. And it's not even like the whole fear thing. It's just like, look, we can't do this as a family. Like, the financial burden plus this, plus that, like getting you around, like there's like 20 of us, not really, but like there's stuff we have to do, and just being intentional about like, hey, maybe this isn't it. Sorry, but having that conversation and entering into that tough space and not just ignoring it is part of that step.
Shooting down their dreams of being a football player.
I'm a dream crusher. I thought I was a dream. Ouch! That hurts.
No, realistic expectations. Yeah, just of what the name of the game.
And he had
a dream and be a football player. That's not it, but just making sure that.
And he had already made a promise to do something else in the fall. Like he's doing this theater thing, and it's like, we already paid for that, and now you're flipping on us. Well, I just won't do that. But we already signed up. Yeah. Right. So just being a kid of integrity, right? Sure. We're trying to teach all those things.
So intentional dad, very good. So Dyllan Dale, before we talk a little bit about your story, tell us a little bit about being a dad and your family.
Yeah. So there's a lot of dynamics to mind coming out of addiction 6 years ago, getting 2 kids with 2 different moms back into my life, walking all that out. So, now I have a wife. We've got almost a 2-year-old, and then we've got one that's going to be here any hour now. So
your wife is dilated.
Yeah, she's dilated to a 3.5 right now. So
okay. We'll make it quick.
Let's go. Let's get this podcast going. All right.
So there's a lot of different...
Is your phone still on?
Yeah, it's right here. I got it right here. So a lot of different dynamics there with co-parenting, and then navigating stuff with my wife as she becomes a stepmother to my 2 oldest boys. And it's all boys. So I'll have 4 boys. And so bless her heart, she'll have 5 boys in the house to one girl, But it is such a blessing just to be a dad and be trusted again, to pick the kids up and take them with me on weekends and every single week, and go out hiking with them. And it's just so much fun. Yeah.
How different is that to just take in every moment and be in the moment with them? I mean, I know we talk about it sometimes, about how sometimes we can get wrapped up in our schedule and our goals, especially as dads. But then, like, when you're around a kid or one of your kids, you just, everything just kind of stops, and you're like, oh, thank you. We do need to like take in this tree or something that we saw in the woods when we're hiking. Like how much can you talk about that? Like really taking in the moment with them too?
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult as a small business owner, and I work full time, and church and all this stuff. It can be difficult, but I have to be intentional with them and say, I'm going to come pick you guys up this Wednesday, and we're just going to go straight out and go hiking. nothing else, and then I know that when we're out there, like, it's just us. We're not distracted. I'm not distracted by trying to cook dinner or this or that. And so, yeah, I think that sometimes for me, like, I'll realize, hey, I've gone a week with telling you, no, I'm not going to play soccer with you. And I have to say, hey, Dyllan, go play soccer with them. And so for me, like, I sometimes it's difficult. It really is, as a father, to say, okay, Earth, everything else in my life, I don't even think about it right now. It's just me and my boys.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing that you're saying, because I think people listening could be like, man, I don't have time for any of that. And what you're saying is nobody does. Yeah. It's hard. Like, all hard. Of this is hard. Yeah. And that's kind of that space of, like, being the intentional dad is to say, like, okay, man, you're right. Like, I'm going to put down my phone. I'm going to be here. Let's go outside and maybe crush a dream or two. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. But, like, I mean, just being in that space is like you're in the arena.
No,
right?
It's
you're
real.
Fighting.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And sometimes, like, Bentley lately, for my oldest 11-year-old, for some reason, he's stuck on, he needs a dirt bike. And so, I consistently every week for the past 3 weeks have to tell him, son, that's like $1,000 and it's going to take a long time for you to raise that. I don't have $1,000. And then he's like, well, okay, I'll ask mom. And then it's like the next week he'll come back and it's like I have to crush that again. It's just, hey, sorry, bud. But,
Well, that kind of segs into our next question here, which is kind of the topic of this podcast, and that is peer pressure and self-esteem. So has there ever been a time where your kid has come across self-esteem or peer pressure that has impacted you or their life? And the reason I bring that up is after the bike, sometimes that, when we talk about material things, I mean, that's a big thing. I know I hear with other dads, like, that, your kids want to stay up with what other kids have. So I know that kind of goes in the avenue of, like, peer pressure and self-esteem. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it's affected your family?
Yeah. And I think the culture nowadays pressures us dads to be such providers to the point where if we can't get something for our kids, like, for me, I feel like I'm a failure. I'm letting them down. I'm not doing enough. I need to work harder. I need to get up earlier. I need to provide more and more and more. That's the culture we live in today. And I think from, like, school, it's like, my 11-year-old, he's like, can I have a phone? No, can't have a phone. Well, all the other kids at school have a phone. Every kid at the school has a phone. Yep. And it's like so much pressure, tablet, and then this, the kids are doing this, the other kids are doing this. Yeah. And it's just this constant pressure. And then it's different from the 11-year-old to the 9-year-old to even the 2-year-old. You want to take them to go visit this or do that science center. And it's like, constant pressure. Yeah.
And constant comparison. And I know, obviously, social media always comes up in a lot of these topics where we do podcasts. And I know that that's kind of an avenue where you can kind of get pushed towards peer pressure and self-esteem. But, even to your point, and I know we kind of joked around about it with the football thing. I mean, that's definitely, that falls in the area of peer pressure and self-esteem. For sure. So I guess the question is, and I'll go back to you, Jason, like, how do you handle that? Like, what is the first thing that you kind of talk about or just kind of brainstorm?
I think it's that united front. And I know, like, Dyllan and I and other people we've talked about, other community members that I get to talk with, is like, what are your goals for your family? Right. And so, like, going back to, like, look, we're going to do activities where more than one kid can participate together. Right. So if you're running track, there's like, hey, 3 kids can all run track together and they all practice same time. So when I'm driving, one kid is, we've done theater. There's a group. So like 4 of my kids were doing theater. They're all in the same production. There's different roles. And it's like, that helps our family because it makes it make sense. So, and then it's like, this is how we're going to do it together. And, like, sometimes that means that the one-off outliers don't get the phone because, hey, we're not going to do that. Like, and that's the peer pressure is like, well, everybody Yeah. Do you remember your parents saying, like, well, if everybody was going to jump off a bridge, where is this bridge? That's what but like that same idea, like I think everybody told that, like, not everybody's jumping off the bridge. And I'm like, my friends aren't jumping off a bridge. And I'm like, well, then one day they did. They're really jumping off a bridge.
Yeah.
But I think all of those things, like just going back to what are we trying to do as a family, like with your spouse, significant other, like, what are you choosing to create in your family? Going back to your goals, things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly, like as you talk about this can be a thing even in relationships. Really, as we go talking about self-esteem and peer pressure, and through social media, and I think that's like common, like just that faith law where it's almost kind of like, hey, worry about you and your business and your family, and don't worry about what they're buying and their budget and what else is going on. And that kind of like goes back to parenting. Like if you're doing that yourself and, mom and dad are doing that together and saying, hey, this is not what we do. We don't compare. Like, we focus on our family, like back to your family conversation. This is kind of how we can handle peer pressure together.
Exactly.
And if you're making that your everyday life as an adult, hopefully they can also see that as well.
Absolutely.
But tough conversations though with self-esteem and peer pressure. This Good Dads podcast is brought to you in part by our generous supporters. This week, we'd like to thank the following: Harry Cooper Joplin Supply, Mr. and Mrs. Bob and Susan Biney, Midwest Auto Source, Solera Energy, Derma Health. Thank you to all of our sponsors. Visit our website at gooddads.com to learn how to contribute to the Good Dads mission. So what makes people vulnerable to peer pressure, do you think? What are some other things that
I think you hit the nail on the head. Social media is just so huge nowadays, and everybody's got a phone, and it's so hard to stay away from it. And there's just so much pressure that as a dad, you're the one. You're the one in the house that and to a point that's true. It's like, we're the head of our household, but it creates anxiety when that's all you think about. That's right. What's running through your head every day is, am I working enough? Am I providing enough? Is my wife comfortable enough? Oh, bills are tight. Gosh, I'm the reason for that. And you blame yourself for stuff. And I think that's the biggest one, social media.
So does that affect your personal self-esteem as a dad sometimes? Like, do you have to sometimes question, like, what is going on for you with those things? Because it's almost like an inward question that you're asking yourself. Like, what's happening kind of with me as a dad? Like, I have to check myself to make sure I'm on the right track as well.
Yeah, and then I think the other one for me coming out of addiction is like, I never want to be the dad I once was, which was an absent dad, a dad that wasn't there, that wasn't providing in any way. And sometimes, when small things happen, that fear will rise up in me that, oh man, that's, because I wasn't able to pick Bentley up this Wednesday. Yep. His mom thinks I'm the same old Dyllan I once was because I wasn't able to do this, or, and so that fear rises back up in me. But I have to just say, no, that was a whole nother lifetime ago. And there's been forgiveness, and there's been, I'm a present dad now. I've been present for years. My kids don't even know who I once was, because that's a fear too, is that my kids will look at me and say, oh, dad's not doing enough, or this or that. And I just say, no, those voices that are telling me that, they're not true. They're just not true.
Which could be some of the same voices that with self-esteem, whether that's about us as dads or kids.
Absolutely.
Those negative voices that are telling you that you need these things. You need the football. You need a $1,000 bike. Like, to make sure that you're that person. So, I mean, it's kind of negative self-talk is kind of self-esteem for us all, right?
Yeah. I think even that vulnerability, like Dyllan, I hear in your story, like you're very vulnerable, you're very self-aware. And I think that's kind of like the, that kind of battles against that self-esteem and all those peer pressure. Cause like you know who you are. Like, it, kind of back to the intentional dad. The whole conversation is like, intentional dads do intentional things. Like, we're purposeful. We're like, you're going to go pick up your kids. Why? Because I want to be purposeful. I want to be intentional. I'm going to step into that. And like, I'm going to have a conversation about whether it's a phone or the dirt bike. Cause everybody wants the toys, and we do too. And I think like being vulnerable even in that space to say like, hey, listen, I'm with you. I want to give you everything. But if I give you everything, then like number one, I can't, right? Like then we're like broke because you have all these toys, and then like you don't really care about them. You haven't earned anything. Yeah. Like all those things that like we think back to ourselves, like when we were mad at our parents, and then we're like, like 10 years later, we're like, yeah, they were right. You know, and you're like, dang it. Yeah. My dad was right. You know,
I'm becoming my dad. Dang it.
Dang it. I think about that with my kid. I was like, you know, and I couldn't, there were certain things I couldn't do because they just said like, no, you're not going to do that. And now I'm like thinking back like, man, maybe I just felt like that was anyway.
So, okay, let's take a trip back here real quick so we can really wrap our minds around peer pressure.
Sure.
Think about like, you know, we're three dads sitting here talking about our kids and peer pressure.
Sure.
Self-esteem. Think back at a time where you felt enough peer pressure, whatever that might have been when you were growing up, and how you tried to spin it on your parents. Like sometimes I try to travel back to those mindsets because it is almost like the end of the world. Like if I don't get a certain batting glove for baseball, like it's going to be the end of the world. Like I'm not going to, my average is going to drop.
Yeah.
People are going to look at me differently. They're not going to want me on their team. I'm going to let the team down.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have no batting gloves. You know, I'm going to be borrowing somebody's bat again. I'm not going to have my own bat, you know, but somehow I got through all that.
Yeah.
You know, and I was better because of it. I didn't like that when I was a kid, but you know, thankfully my dad and my parents knew a little bit about kind of setting the boundaries of that and saying that, hey, you don't need everything that everybody
$300 bat. Remember those? I mean, literally $300.
I couldn't even imagine. It was for rich people.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know.
I only had one baseball glove. I was thinking about shoes the other day. I remember buying my parents like were like, you can't buy the Jordans. I remember like, it was like, I wanted those so bad that I saved up. I had a paper out. I saved up my own money and I bought them. And I remember looking back, like I spent like $140 on a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
You know, because I wanted to fit in, but I had to do it. My parents were going to do that. And I see this sometimes with my kids who like, well, I'll do it. And I'm like, but you know what? I mean, like, yeah, but you don't have a job. Like, how are you going to get, you know, the whole complexity of that. But
I got to pay you. Well, I'm still buying it. If you're going to do chores to get the money, like.
Right.
What was yours, Dylan? Did you have something that
you know, it's difficult for me, but like while you guys were talking, I couldn't help but to sit here and think like, don't you think about your parents now and go, wow, they were providing stuff though that I didn't even realize at the time. And like my dad was a single dad when I was, I think 11 or 12 was when my parents split up. So there my dad was as a single dad, and I'm asking him for, hey, Dad, I want to try playing guitar. And he provides a guitar. He provides a car when I turned 16. I think back at that like, wow, how cool was it of Dad to come through like that? But for me, like it was hard in school because I never really fit in with one kind of group of people. And so I like tried them all. And so like there's a season where like I wanted to be like part of the band kids. So like then I tried playing an instrument. And then there's a season that is like I wanted to be with kind of some of the sports kids. And I think eventually that kind of maybe led me to that road of addiction because that's where I could kind of fit in. You know, the kids that were getting high just accepted me. I didn't have to have this or that or whatever. And so, yeah, there was kind of that peer pressure of where do I even fit in, you know? And
where do you belong?
Where do I
belong? Who's your
people? Right. Yeah. That was so big in school. Do you remember that? Yeah. Do you remember even growing up, like in fourth, fifth, when you start figuring it out, you're like, wow, like I have to fit in with these guys. Like they have the shoes. So I have to have, they've got the belt buckle. Well, I got to go get that belt buckle, you know, and then you pester your parents for weeks on to get it. Gosh, yeah.
So let me ask a little bit more difficult question. As we're kind of talking about material things. How do you protect your kids from peer pressure? Like, how does that conversation? Because what's funny to me sometimes is we'll talk about this and I'm like, I want to be intentional and go, I think I'm just going to talk to my son and just tell him, like, hey, it's okay. Like, you don't have to do that, buddy. But it ain't that easy. No. And if it was,
it's
you know
not.
what I mean? Like,
oh
it's
my
just
gosh.
not. That's why this isn't ever a lecture podcast.
No.
This is of like, hey, this is what we did and it didn't work.
We're all struggling together, like the three of us.
Yeah.
And then, hey, welcome into our story because we're with you.
Yeah, it's like we're walking through like a dark haunted house together.
Oh my gosh,
we don't know when we're gonna get scared and bump into walls. Like that's kind of what we're doing together.
Yeah.
So I know this is a tough one, but like, how do you even start with like, because then we get into the conversation of like, you want your kids to have experiences and make some fails, but not completely fall down.
Yes.
So like, how do you protect without being too much of a helicopter?
Yeah.
And then what do those conversations look like about peer pressure?
Yeah. I heard a quote like a week ago that comes to mind, and it goes, I now know why my parents said they can come over here, but you can't go over there growing up. I now realize the importance of that. It's like, and like you said, you want your kids to have experiences. You want your kids to venture out and fail and realize this isn't the right thing to do. But at the same time, as the father's heart, you don't want them in any situation that puts them in any type of risk or danger just because you love them so much. And it's hard to find that line. Man, like with my oldest, I found a magazine under his bed one time. And that conversation was hard. It's like, because you understand that you were that kid once. Yeah. And you're trying to think of like, what did I need at that time? And then you're trying to give your child that. But at the same time, you're dealing with emotions of fear, anger. You're dealing with all those emotions as a father because you want to protect your kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it is difficult to navigate those hard conversations of protecting them. Yeah.
I think I'll use this again. My oldest, who's 19 now, he wanted a motorcycle. And so I put all these parameters up to get a motorcycle. Like, okay, if you want a motorcycle, then you got to do the class. Like, you got to go to Ozark Tech. You got to pay for that. But like through all those things, like you got to have a car that actually runs because, when it's 15 degrees in the morning, you're not going to ride your motorcycle. Like that feels like a good idea until you're on it and you're like freezing. So it's like just creating the barriers around it that he had to hurdle through. And the reality is I took the motorcycle class with him. Like we did this father-son thing. We did it together. He has a motorcycle, but then he wrecked a car and had to sell one. And then he's got to, so it's like he walked through that. We were with him, but it was like, here's the path. I'm going to say yes, but it's yes with restrictions. Yeah. So he wasn't, I don't even think he got it. I want to say he was like 17, before he finally had enough money. He had enough for if he had a repair on his car, like he had all these things he had to do first. And so he was able to get a motorcycle like all the cool kids. Cause I wanted a motorcycle. I never got one. Yeah. And I still don't have one, but like, I know how to ride it.
You should get him one. We should get a $1,000 one.
There you go. Buy me the electric one. But I think with that, like I'm protecting him, but also saying yes.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. But being intentional with, hey, maybe I do that class with you. And we bought it was like, we paid for the class for a birthday present or something like that. So we help fulfill dreams, but it's also with the parameters of like stepping through the hard things and you're learning lessons and getting to do what you want. So I think sometimes that's it. Like, if you can drive next year and you want to play football and you're going to drive there and you're going to pay for all that, well, maybe that's another conversation next year. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And no, don't say yes to any other thing in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's like, just all that is because we always want to change. Like, I want the new shiny thing.
Sure.
Right.
And that's the peer pressure. Right.
And also like my biggest takeaway here of what I hear you guys saying too is, kids are still trying to figure out. They're still trying to navigate and they're still trying to learn. We're still trying to learn.
Yeah.
And I think like to your point, too is almost kind of like, remember when we were young and we were confused.
Yes.
And,
what did we need at
fearful,
the time?
and then sometimes you don't even know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like with those, with some of
Mm-hmm.
those guidance options that you're giving them. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to get a motorcycle and
Mm-hmm.
the license. Like,
Right. Hey, Dyllan, talk more about, because I think that's a real intentional place with the peer pressure. When you find your kid in something, like what was going through your mind thinking through, because I think that's a very empathetic thought process. Intentional dads are empathetic when kids are dealing with peer pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do when Bentley, like you find this crisis and it's like, they're going to be afraid. They know they're scared to come to you with all these things.
Sometimes the best thing you can do and the only thing you can do is just speak truth into them. Say, hey, this is where this can lead. And, if you don't realize that and start thinking about that now, it could become a bigger problem for you. And, hey, I always make sure to reinsure I love you.
Right.
We're talking about this because I love you, and, I think for each kid, like for me, like they need something different too, because I'm still navigating stuff with Ezra that I'm not navigating with Bentley anymore. And I'm navigating stuff with Bentley that Ezra doesn't understand, but like I'm doing it in front of them. And so, I always have to be intentional in that, well, who is Bentley and what does he need? And what did I need when I was his age? And then again, make them understand that because these other kids are doing it, that doesn't make it okay to do, or that doesn't make it to be the thing that you need to do. I always make sure to tell them it's okay to be different. It's okay to be completely different and odd from all the other kids at school, because you're going to grow up one day and you're going to be your own person and they're going to be their own person. And I always try to make sure they understand that, they don't have to hold on to those peer pressures at school because it's not going to matter one day at all, So
I know you have all boys, but maybe this question is more for Jason, but how do sons and daughters differ to this peer pressure thing? Because I've just knowing what I know from my wife, and I have a 6-year-old stepdaughter, she always brings up like the teenage years and the middle school years about how hard and how nasty that other girls can be to girls. And obviously I've never had that experience. So, so this might be, obviously a different conversation or different things that you might have to be aware of when you're talking about self-esteem and peer pressure.
Well, I think there's like that, all the magazines, right? I think that was all the covers where the girls are looking at it like, I don't look like that person. And the reality is nobody looks like that person. Everything's touched up, so it's like having that conversation around, weight and all those other things affect girls.
Which obviously
more than,
now it's TikTok, social media.
Oh yeah.
Instagram,
oh sure. That's right.
And
oh yeah.
And you get to look at it all day.
I mean, seriously, like I remember looking at someone's profile and thinking like, that doesn't even look like that person. And then my daughter was the one who was like, oh, that's a filter. And I was like, what? She's like, oh yeah. She's showing me the filters.
Yeah.
And I was like, it can make your eyes like look like you have longer eyelashes
like
and all
a
this stuff.
Or
it does.
It's like wild.
And it's in there. So then you're taking your best shot, right? Or my favorite one is the Be Real, because they'll take the Be Real like 4 times because it's not. And I'm like, that's not Be Real, right? The whole point of that was like, there's this timer that goes off and you got 2 minutes to take a shot. And they're literally like, no, take it again. And they're like trying to, and I'm like, this is just.
That one wasn't real enough.
It wasn't real enough.
I'm more real now than I was.
I didn't like my face, And the other, like, let's just say this for like boys versus girls. Like my daughters, even my daughter who's like 7, like one day she was like pooching her lips out. Like the girls like do this like little lip pooch out thing. And I was like, why are you taking a picture like that? Because her 17-year-old older sister does that.
Yeah.
And why does she do it? Because she probably saw it somewhere else. Like my lips look bigger. And I was just like, what is this? So I think all of that, like, I think girls are more aware of how they look than guys, Like I have my oldest is like, if you try to put a collared shirt on him, it's like he feels like it's a porcupine poking him, right? Oh, it's itchy. I can't, So like, it's just, I think boys and girls are different. Boys are like, get in there and take a shower, and girls are like 2 showers a day, and what my hair looks like. So it's just all those complexities. It's different.
Is it more conversations about peer pressure and self-esteem, or is it just being more aware with girls kind of a thing? Since
man, that's an interesting one. I think for guys, like, I don't think my teenagers, some of my teenagers, they don't even talk. Like my oldest, it's like you get grunts out of him, and that's like, hey, good morning. Ugh. Yeah. And that that means yes, I love you, Dad. Right. That's what I've taken.
Caveman.
Where my daughter, like, seriously, she'll come in, like, I'll be loading the dishes or something, and she'll just sit down. Like, yes, oh, I want to talk, and then you got to be in it. And if I leave, it's like, I thought you were gonna talk to me, and then I'm like, man, I already have one wife. It's like having like, oh gosh, I can't win here either, So I think presence. I mean, if anything, what your story, like maybe the whole goal of peer pressure is just to be available, and to be a listening voice, and to be like a counselor almost. Man, that must have been hard. Like I hear that must have been hard at school, or like you feel like, hey, if you don't have those, like, people are going to think you're less than or something, like, just to help empathetically listen. And
sure.
So maybe that's just it, because it works for both. Because sometimes, it's never convenient. Like, I think we were talking about that once before. It's like you're about to go to bed, and they're like, "Hey, Dad, you got a second?" And you're like, "Oh, because like,
I was almost to bed,
no,
but you don't know when you're going to get another chance, and you also don't want to ever say no if they want to talk to you, because it could be a conversation about peer pressure, self-esteem.
Yes.
You never know.
Well, you always think about it later. When you say no, like for me, it's like the next day I'll be like, man, why did I pass that up? You know, I know that he wanted that, and I know that it would have meant a lot to him, and so, gosh, you can't beat yourself up. But kind of back to what you're saying, Bentley was diagnosed with autism, and going to school, he's just an oddball, and he deals with a lot of other kids picking on him and, outcasting him and stuff like that. And as a parent, navigating that with him has been really interesting especially the past couple of years. Because once you start to get around to that 10, 11 years old, that's when other kids really start picking on you, And so for Bentley, I always go back to, again, hey, you are your own person. You are who you are, and the other kids are who they are, and you cannot feel pressure to change things about you just because they're picking on you, or this or that. So I don't have any daughters, so I don't understand all that yet. Maybe I will one day,
but still, like to your point, like you I mean, that just kind of put me in a spot of like getting bullied in like middle school and getting into high school, and you just. And back to your point, like the only thing you can do is empathy. Like not that they want to think back to 1994 or 93 because they can't comprehend that. That's not even a real world then. You know what I mean? But like I think about some of that, and it is hard. Like I'm trying to figure out who I am. I don't know who I am. And other people are either bullying me, then I'm like
trying to tell you who you should be.
Yes, and I'm like, I'm trying to figure that out, and then I'm like, all right, should I go with this group? Should I go with that group? So yes, this is a real thing, peer pressure and self-esteem. So do we have any final thoughts from you guys? Anything that we may have missed or?
Man, we covered quite a bit today.
Okay. Beware of social media.
Yes.
I mean, and also just, I think Dyllan's got a great point. Like remembering that you've struggled, and we've talked about that. I think we've all struggled, and then to look at your kid and to realize, man, they don't know what we know. But not to be like, not to lecture, not to be lecture dad, just to be like, man, like maybe
not that we know everything.
Right. But to ask those questions like, man, tell me more. I think I was in this class, and I think Dr. Baker, she was here. She would tell us that the best fiber, tell me more about that. Just tell me more about it. Like just being a listening ear and having them sort of emotionally walk through all that and just being a guide. I think as a dad, like we're a guide, we're going to come alongside them, and we want to beat up those bullies and we want to protect them. And sometimes we just can be there with them.
Yeah.
You know?
It's good.
So
awesome. Well, thank you, fellas, so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate it. Dyllan Dale, of course, founding Wild Foods by Dyllan, who reconnects people and nature through food. So that was great to have you on. We really appreciate your time, and thank you as always,
absolutely.
Jason, from
Thanks,
Victory
Fotsch.
Victory Mission.
Yeah.